This is Arun Trivedi, and you are with the AI with Arun show. In this episode, our guest is a visionary leader at the intersection of healthcare, technology, and innovation. Maneesh Goyal joins us on the AI with Arun show today. He serves as the Chief Operating Officer of Mayo Clinic Platform, where he's transforming healthcare through cutting edge technology solutions. With a remarkable background spanning biomedical engineering, electrical engineering, and an MBA from UCLA, Manish brings a unique cross-disciplinary perspective to healthcare innovation. Prior to his current role, he has been an early employee at Broadcom, a managing director at the Miramar Venture Partners, and held key leadership positions at Welltok. At Mayo Clinic Platform, he drives strategic initiatives in AI, data analytics, and advanced care models, including the groundbreaking program like the Advanced Care at Home. So, Manish, a very warm welcome to our show.
Thank you. And just a minor edit on that. I'm a participant and supporter of the Advanced Care at Home program, and but that is led by a practice-focused team. But boy, do I believe in that program. I'm sure we can talk about that as we jump in. Pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you, Manish. So, Manish, let's get started. So, explain to our viewers about what Mayo Clinic Platform is and what the primary objectives of the platform are.
Sure. So let's maybe take it up a notch and think about where Mayo Clinic fits into the ecosystem. For those that don't know, Mayo Clinic, we're a tertiary quaternary center, meaning we take care of very complex or serious patients. Mayo has been around for 160 years. We see patients from 140 different countries every year. Well, about 1.2, 1.3 million patients in one of our three sites, either Rochester, Minnesota, Phoenix, Arizona, or Jacksonville, Florida. And what's novel about our organization that feeds into your question is there's been a foundational thing that just governs everything we do. A lot of organizations say they're patient-centric, but our primary directive at Mayo Clinic is the needs of the patient come first. And that is an important thing that drives us. We're not for profit. 100% of our colleagues, physicians, nurses, administrators, support personnel, everyone is salaried. And no one gets bonuses. This is just a sort of a very level culture in terms of focus on delivering the best value for patients. Or for not for profit as well. So every single dollar that is brought into the enterprise goes at some point directly into patient care. And so those are important things that are foundation. The second thing is that Mayo has had this notion of integrated medicine. So that means when you come in for a particular issue, we wrap around a set of clinical services and specialties to determine a true triangulated diagnosis. So, for something related to lung cancer, we'll put a pulmonologist and an oncologist and radiologist, et cetera, pathologist to do a true diagnosis. And that goes a long way. And then finally, our founding physicians, the Mayo brothers, from day one started this notion of sharing and learning. So bringing the best practices of their travels back into Mayo Clinic and teaching the Mayo way to organizations worldwide. So that's who we are, right? That is, there's no better mission to what I just described, no better place, I think, in the way we approach things. So 5 years ago, our current CEO, Dr. Gianrico Farrugia, asked a question. We've been number one for a long period of time. You get the best care by some certain measures at Mayo Clinic. How do we enable more than 1 million lives impact? How do we impact billions of lives? And we can't drive more patient volume, nor should we. How do we actually disseminate in a scalable way what we know and what others know, right? So going back to our roots. And so Mayo Clinic Platform was born, and our charge is simple. Make our practice better, 2, share our knowledge. 3, continue to build a sustainable model for Mayo Clinic. And then last is really to show the world that you can do things differently under a platform model. So those are our primary objectives, and how. So I'll pause there and see. There's a lot we can unravel in that, but hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I like the way you describe the key objectives of the platform, and how you're not thinking just about a million people, but you're thinking about the world at large, right? You're thinking about a billion people.
Yeah.
So that is phenomenal, Manish. And Manish, so a couple of pointers out there. One is as platform that you're building that's obviously at that scale, right, in billions of people. Did you envision the platform going in? And so that's one part of the question. The second part of the question is there's a lot of data analytics and AI that is being built into the platform. So explain to our viewers about both. How did you envision the platform, and how are you using all these newer technologies and data analytics and AI as you are evolving the platform?
Yeah. So it's interesting as we've changed and evolved, but really, in many ways, we have been ahead of the market, and now the market is catching up. And I think the market is catching up to the basics of what we do. The full vision, I think the market will fully realize over time, and I'll try to explain what that means. So 5 years ago, one of the first things that we did as an organization was to become cloud-centric. So if you put yourself in a time machine and go back 5 years, the idea of putting 100% of your clinical knowledge and data in the cloud, people were terrified about it. The entire idea of should you get a BAA with your cloud vendor or not was hotly negotiated in every boardroom. And Mayo made this decision that we're going to move 100% of our clinical data set. And today that data set is almost 50 petabytes into the cloud. Now it's secure, right? We don't let anyone else have access. It's our patient data. So we don't, just open it up. But the second thing we did is said, okay, great. If we just control it and make it very proprietary, right? So that's one of the things in healthcare that's interesting. Everybody is about my data, my patients, my referral pathways. And that's prevented platform thinking in the industry. And so we said, oh, how do we behave differently? We can certainly do the same thing and we'd be successful, but we're not going to get as much impact. And so we asked the question, how do we make our information, which sits in our data, more accessible? And so we crafted what is today, and still at the time was scary and audacious, a strategy that said we're going to consent our patients, meaning we'll get their consent to de-identify the data and make it available in some way. Now, organizations have been doing that for a long time, but we did something different. We said we're not just going to license data. That's not the strategy. What we're going to do is to de-identify 100% of the data, including clinical notes. So if you think about how hard it is to do de-identification of unstructured text, that's what we've accomplished. Billions and billions of notes. We've brought in radiology images, hundreds of millions of radiology images. We brought in all the pathology lab reports and labs. We've brought in all of the structured and unstructured EHR data. 2 years ago, we created a company to do nothing more than scan our pathology slides. Mayo Clinic has over 100 million pathology slides. So today, we've scanned 20 million of those. And prospectively, all slides that happen in pathology at Mayo Clinic are automatically scanned and put into this container. And we're bringing in genomics. So by putting all of that together and then de-identifying it, we now can unlock a lot of knowledge that sits in the 10 million patients that Mayo has seen. And that sets the foundation of a platform thinking, which is now, we're not just going to cordon this off and it's our asset. It's actually, how do we make it available for mankind? And so we put a lot of safeguards in there. So we consent every patient, we de-identify everything. No data ever leaves and no data ever comes into this. And that's important. We actually crafted a strategy called data behind glass. If you do a search on it, you can see how we've thought about it. And by protecting that data, now comes the fun part. We can actually enable anyone who is appropriately going to safeguard that information to do interrogation of that, meaning train algorithms for early diagnosis or precision medicine, or see how drugs or devices are doing in actual patient populations. And I can give you examples of how these things have resulted in direct impact on our patients and our partner healthcare organizations. But by having all of that together, you can do predictive AI. We were ready to do generative AI because we set all that foundation in place. And so now for us, generative AI is just another incremental computational technique that happens to sit on this platform that we've been building for 5 years.
Yep. So Manish, that looked like an awesome lot of work because the problem that we face and we hear from multiple companies is around the data part, right? How do you get data actually in a format that's machine readable, understandable? How do you, have the metadata in place so you're not really recognizing or identifying people in a certain way. So that looked like an awesome lot of work that you guys have done. So talk to viewers about some of the examples, and you were alluding to that earlier, that you can provide certain examples how this has been beneficial. So give viewers a couple of examples there.
Yeah. So to date, we have enabled, I can safely say, hundreds of companies to create solutions on top of this. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them. But they've all been focused on improving diagnosis quality, improving treatment planning quality, as well as identifying novel targets, whether they be digital or molecular targets. So everything is about moving innovation forward. And the second thing we said is whatever we do for ourselves, we want to make available for the world. And I'll explain that in a little later. But to give you concrete examples of things that we've done, one of our companies came in and asked the question, they're around breast cancer. There are several chemotherapeutics that are FDA approved for breast cancer. But we know most clinical trials are run on a fairly homogeneous population relative to the billions of people on the planet. How can we assess whether one particular chemotherapeutic is going to work in a particular genotype or phenotype of a patient versus another? Physicians have known this anecdotally for some time, but not empirically. And so this particular company basically interrogated all the information and was able to show that based on historical data, certain chemotherapeutics work better based on genotypes and phenotypes of particular patient populations. So that results in the question, well, when you're sitting in front of a patient who is South Asian descent versus African American versus Caucasian, can you make different recommendations for their diagnosis? Well, the short answer is yes. And so now you just need to put it into workflow, and the outcomes show themselves as being better. So one example. Another example is our cardiology department, which I would say is phenomenal in terms of thinking about how to advance the diagnostics of cardiovascular disease. Trained a set of algorithms to detect early asymptomatic diagnosis of cardiovascular condition. In this case, it was something called low ejection fraction, a fairly fatal condition. You see a lot of athletes that will be perfectly fine, and then sometimes they have a catastrophic condition, catastrophic event that results in death. And a human can't read the ECG. There's no clinical information in the ECG that's readable by a human, and there's nothing in their clinical workup that would say that this patient is at risk. But by training a set of algorithms against a set of data, we came up with created an algorithm that has high enough AUC that now it's been FDA approved, it's reimbursable, and it's implemented at Mayo. So when you come to Mayo Clinic, whether you come in for a cardiology workup or not, this algorithm's sitting in the background running. And why that's important is you can detect patients that would otherwise go undetected. So the patient gets earlier diagnosis, which is better. The earlier intervention means lower cost for the healthcare system. And we, from a Mayo Clinic, have delivered better care. It's a win-win-win. We didn't stop there. We took that algorithm and tested on a single lead ECG in patients from another part of the world and showed that it could actually work in a remote model as well. So now we can actually take that improvement that we've done for our patients in this academic medical center and made it available to health systems that are not academic medical centers. And that's going back to one of our 4 key imperatives, is how we're going to impact billions of lives.
Brilliant, brilliant. So does that mean that if I have a healthcare institution sitting outside of the Mayo Clinic system, then can I still have access to the platform? And can I offer that to my patients?
Yeah. So the reason we're called Mayo Clinic Platform is not because we're a technology. Oftentimes when people think of the word platform, they think politics or technology. And in this case, we're defining the word platform as more of a way of operating. Platforms that you're all familiar with are about shared resources and enabling ecosystems and creating efficiency. And that's what we're doing. And our platform strategy takes all of what I just described, that entire data apparatus, the ability to create solutions on top of that, enabling third parties to create solutions. And then we, as Mayo Clinic, run an analysis and say the claims made by the solution partner are validated by our analysis or they're not. And that report results in a qualification report. If the results are valid and the solution is appropriate for patients, we make it available to our health system partners. Today, we have 51 health system partners covering tens of millions of lives across the globe that have access to solutions that we've qualified. So if you think about a 60-bed hospital in some rural city in the United States or globally, they have no chance against the innovation that is happening daily. But now we, by integrating into their workflow, can bring these solutions rapidly so their 2-person IT department doesn't get overwhelmed. And because we are clinically focused around quality and because we're focused on the patient, there's a trusted relationship there because we're not going to enable anything on the platform that does not improve patient care. Just one more note. One of the other things that we did was recognize that Mayo's data is biased. Every data set is inherently biased. So we actually went around the world and said, if we're going to assemble a set of partners that diversify the population of data that is underneath, so it's more representative of the people, the billions of people on the planet, how do we do that? And we went around and found like-minded institutions that are equally focused on high-quality care, that have high-quality data, and created this federated partnership. So today we have 9 institutions representing close to 40 million patients that cover the middle of the United States, so Arkansas, Missouri, and Iowa. So Mercy Health System is a partner. UHN, which is the #1 system in Canada, is a partner covering Toronto, so the sort of a melting pot of the world. Albert Einstein in Sao Paulo, Brazil, is a partner, so they get patients from all across South America. And they're the #1 system in South America. Sheba, which was the #1 system in Israel, is a partner. Seoul National University, the #1 system in South Korea. Singapore Health, which is the #1 system in Singapore, is a partner. And we recently added a system in that covers Africa and Pakistan. And we're in active discussions to bring partners from the Middle East and obviously from India as well. And so the idea is now that data foundation is broader. So if you're training algorithms and creating novel learnings, you're not just doing it on one institution's data, you're doing it across. And just want to, for your listeners, we do not move data outside of any one environment. We push the question to the institution in their cloud, and then we get numerical answers back, but we never allow data transfers across institutional boundaries or country boundaries for that matter.
Yeah, data security is an important part, but there are two things I would like to highlight for my viewers. One is about the diversity that you're bringing to the data, right? So it's not just North American data or of people of a certain race or Caucasian data, but you're actually looking at data across the whole world in a way, right? And with the other discussion that we have in progress, we're probably able to get even more data. So that's one part. And the other part that I would like to highlight for my viewers is the data security part. You spoke about how you're not letting the data flow from one firewall to another firewall, one country to another country, but that's all contained within, so people can actually be confirm that the data is safe and secure with your platform.
That's right.
Yeah. So Manish, talk to our viewers about some of the challenges that you faced. I mean, obviously, there's a very, very complicated system that you have built, and you have built over a period of time. I mean, over 5 years. So talk to our viewers about some of the challenges that you faced and how did you go about working around those challenges or mitigating for them?
Oh boy. So maybe I'll go over time and identify the key challenges and roadblocks and bumps that we hit and how we solve them. I think the first one in the first year was the organization getting comfortable with tens of millions of data that is now sitting in the cloud available to partners, right? The organizational damage, if that were ever to be misused or get out, would be enormous. So we had to we went way beyond industry standard to ensure that our approach was protecting patients at the top of the game. And that directly, that is why we were able to convince all these systems. We have 50% of the top 11 institutions in the world that are partners with us. Right? That doesn't happen because we picked standard off-the-shelf cybersecurity tools. We invented new tools. Right? The whole notion of data behind glass didn't exist 5 years ago. But that took a lot of convincing. It took a lot of convincing for the organization's privacy, legal team, risk team to get comfortable that, we weren't going to somehow destroy a 150, 160-year-old organization. The second obstacle that we ran was more cultural, which was, as I said, platform businesses and models at their core rely upon shared infrastructure. Inherently, by using it, contributing to it, or consuming it, you are agreeing to participate in a shared transaction with other users in some way. That's how platforms work, right? when you buy something from Amazon, you're enabling other buyers of the same good, because the intrinsic model that Amazon has with that seller is that they're going to provide multiple buyers, right? So instead of you go finding a direct one-to-one relationship, you're letting Amazon be the intermediary. And so from a culture standpoint, that ability to share was challenging, right? Most organizations viewed their data, quote unquote, their data, as theirs. And that language persists everywhere. And so getting everybody comfortable that we, Mayo, can deliver better patient care and enable better patient care, and that's our core mandate, without hurting the organization, took a lot of convincing. I think we have a lot of proponents in the industry for it today. And I think I would say those were the biggest challenges that we had.
Yeah, no, and those are pretty big boulders to move, right? What you just articulated.
Yeah.
So Manish, let's talk about the second segment of our show and more on the
Yeah.
future-oriented side. So, what are some of the long-term visions that you have, and what are some of the other roadmap items that you have on the platform? Obviously, you have worked on it a lot. There are other, institutions that you're talking to, but talk to our viewers about some of the new features that you're trying to build in the near future.
Yeah, so where we are, we're at this the next phase of our cycle, and so we have a foundation. We have our our partner ecosystem of data collaborators, and then we have our growing ecosystem of what we call solution developers. These are the innovative companies that are developing, close to 80 companies and growing, that are utilizing the platform. And now we're bringing those solutions that are created by these companies to health systems in our network. And so as that utilization takes hold, we're going to learn a lot about what works and what doesn't in the industry. As we look forward, our goal is, how do we improve the cycle? So if you step back and think about healthcare IT or healthcare tech, or just transformation in healthcare, it takes a long time. Some people will point to regulation as the long time, but I argue that it's just that the business models of most organizations prevent collaboration. So if we say Mayo is now much more collaborative than any other organization in healthcare on the planet, okay, so that gives us an ability to move faster. So the existing pre-Mayo Clinic and pre-Mayo Clinic platform, the model work like this. I have a need. I'm a healthcare organization. I do a market scan to say I need to fill this need. I have a lack of neurology expertise in my organization, so I'm going to fill it with an upskilling of my primary care physicians by bringing them tools around neurology. So you do a market scan, takes 6 to 9 months. In parallel, somebody who's creating a neurology company does the search, has a hypothesis, does a search and says, I need to start with data. Okay, great. You found an organization. It takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months. That is the industry standard around bringing data sets or data collaborations. Second, you need to go find your first customer. So now you have to align with that partner who's looking for it. It takes a year to run a pilot, heck, to negotiate a contract. And then another year to then validate your learnings. So what we saw was it takes somewhere between 2.5 to 3 years to determine if your hypothesis and the market need aligned. So imagine that, 3 years of spending and on all sides. What we've shown is we can reduce that to under nine months. Hypothesis, implementation, validation, I mean, you still have to go through the regulatory processes if it's a clinical grade device, but that's faster. So you've reduced the waste and you've increased the evolution cycle. Our hope is that we make it so that all of this AI, whether it's predictive or generative, and workflow happens so rapidly so that I, as a clinical um, administrator or person on the administrative side in a clinical organization, can make rapid decisions, because there are many great companies, but not all of them are going to be a fit for us. So that's part of our roadmap, is how to enable faster alignment between companies and care providers.
That's a huge win because, as you said, from 3 years, at the end of 3 years, there's no guarantee of success, right?
Mhm.
And you're reducing that to 9 months, and that's like a huge win. Uh,
And I would just say, if you and if you don't have a win, that's what, and then those losses or negative outcomes cement themselves as negative inertia in the industry, and you get organizations saying, technologies or new solutions don't work, or EHRs, love them or hate them, this is a problem. And so if we buy, whereas the rest of the world, whether it be marketing or finance, their iteration cycles are so fast that they find fit so quickly.
yeah, yeah. And Manish, how do you see the role of newer technologies, be it Gen AI, DeepSeek? We saw what DeepSeek did, it was launched some time
Mhm.
back. How do you see all these technologies and the advanced tools in data analytics playing a role in the roadmap that you have for the future?
Yeah. So for us, there are just computation techniques. At the end of the day, we know that data is a container for knowledge, and what we call solution developers are containers for innovation. Those two things have to find their way in a scalable, fast, efficient way to care providers. Right? That's the ecosystem. And so whether it be numeric recipes that are around, computation techniques that are much more linear, supported. If they're predictive, easy. Generative forces us to think differently, because now you've got to plug large data sets into next to large computation banks with the data available. So we have to think through our architecture, but we support it at the end of the day. The work that's going on at Mayo, whether it be work around creating visual transformers in our radiology practice, or partnering with third-party companies who are creating some novel computation models um, um, for cancer or for pathology. We have created all of that infrastructure to be able to do that. Our approach, as now I'm going to put our Mayo Clinic hat on for a second versus the Mayo Clinic Platform. Our approach has been this: if it's explainable and the math is understandable, we will put it into clinical practice. It has to follow the regulation process, FDA or not. For generative, we've mostly been using it to help us organize data better as an internal tool. We haven't let generative AI connect directly into the physician workflow, or certainly not a patient, that we've not gotten comfortable. But we continue to train and partner with organizations that train on large scale data, so that these tools become better. At the end of the day, what is generative AI? It's actually an integration of a model with data, right? That is effectively what it is. And so we've been all in on this. And frankly, like I said to you at the beginning of this, the industry is just catching up. The need for organized data that is reliable, high quality, available next to a large computational bank. Well, we've been building that infrastructure for 5 years. Now, we couldn't have predicted generative AI being the step change, but we find ourselves in a fortunate spot. And that, my friend, is how we're going to actually make billions of patients' lives better. And so a year from now, it might be something different. That's what's interesting. But
Yeah.
by having a framework, you can plug in the computation technique du jour, and it'll just work fine.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, what matters is the scale part, right? You're able to scale far more and wide
Yeah.
with all the technologies that are available to you. So, Manish, given that the tech landscape is evolving, the needs for patient care is also evolving. There are different kinds of diseases and that are coming up. COVID, for example, I know COVID is old now, but then COVID-like situations. How do you see the healthcare landscape evolve and the technology corresponding health tech landscape evolve over the next, let's say, 5, 10 years?
Oh, that's a broad question.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an analogy, and then I'll give you a specific. Um, um, I think you were born in India. Were you born? What
Yeah,
part of
yeah, I
the
was
world?
born in
Yeah,
India. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I'm going to show my age, but when I was born in India as well. So when I was uh, a kid in India, the idea of getting a communication tool was a landline, a physical line. In India, it took a year. You put your application in, and it took a year or more to get a physical landline installed. I'm not sure if it's much different today, but it was the case 20 years ago. Um, the rest of the world, the rest of the developed world, like the US, landlines were easy, right? It took a week, and everybody had landlines. So landline adoption in India versus a development world was very different. Mid 90s, late 90s, along come cell phones, and the cost curve on cell phones was dropped so low that the percentage of communication tools used in India were predominantly cell phones very rapidly. So the diffusion of cell phones was massive in India, orders of magnitude higher. Whereas in the US and other parts of the developed world, it took a lot longer. And the reason is I've already got a means to communicate. So the incremental convenience of having a phone with me all the time was narrower than having no communication means at all. So in many ways, the developed world leapfrogged the adoption of cell phones um, than the developed world. So why does that matter? I think if you think about the infrastructure that developed worlds have in terms of supply of well-trained physicians, nurses, administrators, and buildings and equipment, whereas you look at the developing world that doesn't have that, I believe that platform models, technology is going to proliferate faster in healthcare in the developing world because there's a need. When you have no healthcare for 100, 200 miles, you will rely upon a digital tool because you have no need. And if the regulatory framework is lower, then you're also going to get faster diffusion. So I do think that that's going to happen in our lifetime, which I think is a good thing. People are going to get better care, right? Um, one of the specifics to answer your question, our approach is okay, great. But when you have to deliver care, how do you do that if the entire notion of healthcare is physical infrastructure? So the other part of platform thinking at Mayo is, you know, instead of when the image of healthcare being a physical building with people waiting with equipment, specialized equipment, waiting for the first patient to come in, the second patient to come in, can we figure out what percentage of that we could actually push into the community, push into the home, push into a clinic that has, in remote parts of the world. So sometimes fortune favors the brave, right? pre-pandemic, Mayo Clinic launched this thing called Hospital at Home. And that model, under our CEO's leadership, said, could we take our sickest of sick patients and figure out a way to take care of them in their home, right? That was the hypothesis. As an aside, the notion of a hospital was created 150, 60 years ago because there was a lot of field-borne infections, meaning patients taken care of in a field developed infections and had bad results. So they said, let's take this patient, put them in a sterile environment. But we know we don't need to do that all the time. So Mayo Clinic, we think somewhere between 15 and 25% of our patient volume can be moved into the home. But we have to deliver a set of services so that patient can have safe, effective care in their home. So that was where Hospital at Home was born. And today, a 3,500, 5,000 square foot facility in Jacksonville, Florida, serves 4 states where we have direct patient care of patients that don't come to the hospital, or instead of having surgery and spending 3 to 5 days in the hospital and then going home on their own, we send them home a day after, and then they get 30 days of care with access to a physician and a nurse available to them 24/7. And that model is the future, right? You don't need to come to the hospital for a lot of the things that patients come in, or you can recover better. If you've ever had to go to a hospital, you know how hard it is. You're constantly here beeping, people coming in and out, and the lighting is never exactly how you have it at home. And so that results in a more complex outcome. So we've been able to show over tens of thousands of patients that we can deliver as good quality care in the home, lower cost, better patient satisfaction. And what we've done is freed up that bed for that patient that absolutely needs it, the patient that needs to be in the hospital. That's innovation. That's how we're going to change.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Manish. And let me share a personal story. Some time back, one of my relatives had to be taken to the hospital for something. And the couple of things. One is he was too scared to go. Right? There's always a scare factor going to a hospital, number
Mhm.
one. And number two, once you are there, you just get more sick as you look at all the people around you. And
Mhm.
there's this constant noise, and you not being able to be close to your loved and near and dear ones, right? Versus what you just said, if I'm at home and being taken care of, still having the same benefits and facilities, or I would ideally receive at a hospital, then it's great. I'm actually with my near and dear ones. At the same time, I feel safe, and I can probably get well better and earlier.
Yeah. 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 And I think, what I said about fortune favors the brave, we have learned so much that today we're actually doing one of the world's first trials where we're delivering chemo, very serious, complex drug to deliver in a patient's home.
Oh wow.
So when you think, why should a patient need to come into a clinic, sit there for for their waiting period, do their infusion, which takes hour or more, then wait for observation, then go home, when you can deliver that safely and effectively in their home. And you've again freed up that bed for a more complex patient. That's how we get better utilization of scarce resources.
Right. And Manish, in that example where you're delivering chemo for somebody at home, does
Yeah.
that mean that there are specialized people who are at the person's home delivering?
Yeah. So you have a trained nurse that goes to the patient's home, because you need observation. At least right now, you need observation. But if you think about a field, that's one of the innovations I think that's necessary, is a more of a field force strategy, right? The ability to deliver services in a patient's home requires a new training model and a new structure. But that is the only way we're going to serve a growing disparate ecosystem. So instead of putting buildings up and then telling patients to come, you put a field force in their community that can react to them when they need it. Now, there are going to be certain things. Let me be clear: we're not going to replace hospitals. There are going to be specialty things like MRIs and CT scans and proton therapy and surgery that are going to have to be done and should be in a hospital. But the purpose of the hospital has to evolve.
Yeah, yeah. And then that way you are democratizing the whole healthcare system and providing far, far more access to many remote parts of the world than what it is today.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Manish, that brings us towards the third segment of our show, which is the rapid fire round. So here's my first question to you. AI in healthcare, is that an opportunity or a threat?
Oh, if anybody answers that as a threat, then I'd question them, their sanity. It's sort of like arguing is an MRI or an X-ray a threat 30, 40, 60 years ago. So we have a saying at Mayo that AI is not going to replace physicians, but physicians who don't engage and utilize AI in the long term, we believe will be replaced by physicians who do. It's just inherently, it's a new tool, it's a new way of doing things, and we at Mayo are re-architecting our physicians, nurses, administrators to benefit from this. So we don't see that as a threat. It's a massive quality and efficiency improvement.
Wonderful. So Manish, what I'm going to do is this part of what you said of physicians who are engaged with AI are going to be far more successful than physicians who don't. I'm going to make sure that my daughter actually listens to it because she wants to be a physician someday. And she's also scared of AI. She thinks that AI is for the computer whiz kids and not for me. But I think what you just said, it's a personal narrative for me. Wonderful. Thank you for saying that. So
You
move
bet.
on to the So move on to the second question. What is your go-to productivity tool?
uh, Gosh, I'm going to sound hypocritical, but I think a plane ride and a good meal is the most productive tool, the highest productivity tool that I've ever experienced, and the amount of time you can save by sitting down with somebody and having a conversation in person, there's just no change for it. And why do I feel like a hypocrite saying that? It's based on what I do, right? So I'm more on the administrative side and partnership side. So that would be my honest answer. From the intention, the question that you asked, the intention, I I would say I find we use Teams and the integrated note-taking function in Teams to be so helpful, because every meeting that you don't have to have a scribe, you can really be focused on a conversation and get the distilled notes and action items, which is good meeting hygiene. So we use that pretty religiously.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, these collaboration tools are fantastic. Like
Yeah.
this meeting is being recorded on Google Meet. I have used and I continue to use Microsoft Teams. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. And not advocating for any particular product, but I would just say that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
those concepts, yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right. The third one. What is the most overrated technology trend in healthcare?
Um, yeah, I think the notion of direct patient engagement with um, generative agents, I think is we see a lot of noise in that on the clinical side. So whether it be diagnosis or triage, I think there's a little too much sci-fi in that. Um, for administrative functions like billing or questions around routing or navigation, chat interfaces, so verbal chat interfaces work great. I think so. I would say I would tread carefully on that front. But what's fascinating is um, the amount of impact technology is having in healthcare is just finally getting to the point that we're actually going to see some great financial outcomes and quality outcomes. So I I would say that we're seeing the idea of uh, being that chasm has been crossed, if you will. So the hype cycle is not as big as it used to be.
Mhm. Interesting. Okay. The next one that I have for you, what is the one book that every healthcare innovator should read?
Yeah. So I got this recently, and I thought it was actually quite good. It's a book by Mike Maples and Peter Zeblum called Pattern Breakers. Um, Fascinating read because at the end of the day, all of our jobs, is no matter what we do, is to recognize patterns and to do something differently, right? Meaning, whether you're an investor, then you recognize patterns and make a trade that is going to benefit from you recognize that pattern before anyone else. Or if you're an innovator, it's about creating businesses because you see this thread. Or if you're a physician or a nurse, it's about recognizing the patterns and diagnoses, right? So I thought it was I take these things. I firmly believe what I just said, that everything we do is about recognizing patterns and employing them better for whatever it is that you do. And this book talks about gives examples of it. So it's not specifically in healthcare, but I think it's very much applicable.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I took a note of that, and that's going to be on my to read list. So thank you for recommending that book.
You bet.
And then the last one that I have for you, that if you were to finish this sentence, that the future of healthcare is dot dot dot.
Now,
Okay, awesome, awesome, and that perfectly aligns with what you are trying to do at Mayo platforms.
yeah. Thank you. Well, I appreciate being on your show. And look, I love these conversations because you're evangelizing the great work, not just at Mayo, but that's happening everywhere. For your colleagues and listeners, I would just say, data should never be a problem. If you have a problem, come find me. Quality of care should never be a problem. If you need something, Mayo's here. And keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, thank you, Manish. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.